A cat drops a dead mouse at your feet. You flinch. Your first instinct is disgust. But somewhere underneath that disgust, if you look closely, there is a flicker of something else. Pride? Maybe. Confusion? Definitely. You did not ask for this gift. You will never ask for this gift. And yet it keeps happening in 100 different forms, across 100 different species, all over the world. A dog brings you a stick. A crow leaves a bottle cap on your windowsill. A whale once, in the cold waters off California, pushed a diver toward the surface with its own body. Something in the animal kingdom keeps reaching toward you, and the strangest part is not that it happens. The strangest part is that you have never really asked why. You call it instinct and move on. But instinct is not an explanation. Instinct is a word humans use when they do not want to look any closer. So look closer. Because what animals are doing when they bring you their young, their food, their vulnerable and precious things, is not simple at all. It is something that took millions of years to build. It is a language older than language. And it says more about what you are to them than you have ever stopped to consider. Start with the cat and the mouse, because it is the most common version of this behavior and the most misunderstood. For decades, people assumed the cat was showing off. Look what I caught. Praise me. But that explanation falls apart under scrutiny. Cats do not seek praise the way dogs do. They are not driven by your approval. So what is actually happening? Researchers studying feline behavior, including work compiled by animal behaviorist John Bradshaw at the University of Bristol, point to something more specific. A domestic cat's hunting behavior is deeply tied to teaching. In the wild, a mother cat brings live or partially disabled prey back to her kittens, not to eat it herself. To teach them how to kill it, she's running a lesson. Watch. Try. Learn. When your cat has no kittens of its own, that instinct does not disappear. It just loses its intended audience. And it looks around the room for a replacement. It finds you. You become the kitten who never learned to hunt. Pathetic from a cat's perspective, but salvageable. The mouse on your doormat is not a gift. It is a curriculum. This reframes everything, doesn't it? You thought you were being thanked. You were actually being pitied. Think about how specific this behavior actually is. A cat does not bring you a random object. It brings you prey, or something that resembles prey, and it brings it in a particular condition. Sometimes dead, sometimes injured, still twitching. Released onto your kitchen floor with what looks almost like ceremony. That gradient matters. A mother cat calibrates the lesson to the skill level of her kittens. Very young kittens get dead prey, something safe to sniff and paw at without risk. Older kittens get injured prey, something that still moves, something that forces them to practice the kill. When your cat brings you something half alive and lets it loose in your living room, it is not being cruel for the sake of cruelty. It is running an assessment. It has decided, somewhere in its small and ancient brain, that you are ready for the next level. This is almost insulting, if you think about it long enough. Your cat has been quietly grading your competence for years. And cats are not alone in reading you this way. Birds do something remarkably similar, though it looks nothing like a mouse on a doormat. Crows, among the most cognitively sophisticated birds on the planet, have been observed leaving small objects, buttons, bits of glass, bottle caps on the windowsills or porches of humans who regularly feed them. Wildlife researcher John Marsluff at the University of Washington has spent years studying crow behavior and found that crows are capable of recognizing individual human faces, remembering them for years, and treating specific people differently based on past interactions. A crow that has been fed by you is not treating you the way it treats a stranger. It is tracking you, specifically, the way it might track a member of its own flock. The gifts, when they appear, look less like payment and more like the kind of object, sharing behavior birds use with each other to reinforce a bond worth keeping. So already, before you even reach the whales, a pattern starts to take shape. Different species, different objects, different mechanisms, but the same underlying signal over and over. You have been noticed. You have been categorized as safe, or useful, or worth investing in. And the animal is telling you so in the only language available to it. But cats are only the beginning. Push further back, into the deep evolutionary record, and you find something even stranger. You find that the impulse to bring young or vulnerable things toward another creature, especially a creature perceived as safe or powerful, is not limited to house pets. It shows up in the wild, unprompted, uncoached, in species that have never lived near a human home. In 2016, off the coast of California, biologist Deborah Giles was part of a team observing a female orca carrying her dead newborn calf for over 2 weeks straight, refusing to let it sink, pushing it through the water again and again. The world called it grief, and it likely was. But that same year, and in others, researchers have documented humpback whales physically intervening to protect seals and other animals from orca attacks, sometimes shielding them under a flipper, sometimes carrying them on their backs, away from danger. Marine biologist Robert Pittman, who documented several of these encounters, described a pattern that did not fit neatly into any existing theory of animal behavior. Why would a humpback whale risk energy, safety, and time to protect an animal that is not its own offspring, not its own species, and offers nothing in return? This is where the story stops being about pets and starts being about something much older. Something written into the architecture of the mammalian brain itself. Here is the plain English version of what scientists think is happening. Mammals evolved a powerful, ancient set of instincts around caregiving. Protect the vulnerable. Respond to distress signals. Nurture what cannot nurture itself. This system had to be broad and a little bit clumsy, because evolution rarely builds precise tools when a rough one will do the job. A mammal brain that is very good at recognizing, helpless, needs protection, and acting on it will save more of its own offspring than a mammal brain that is pickier about who deserves help. But a broad trigger has a side effect. It occasionally fires for the wrong target, a seal, a diver, you. Neuroscientists call this a supernormal stimulus problem, a term first coined by Nobel Prize-winning ethologist Nico Tinbergen in the 1950s while studying birds. Tinbergen found that animals could be tricked by exaggerated versions of the signals they were built to respond to. A bird would ignore its own egg in favor of a giant fake egg painted in exaggerated colors, because the fake egg triggered the "sit on this, protect this" instinct even more strongly than the real one. The trigger, not the target, is what matters to the ancient parts of the brain. Humans, and human infants especially, activate an enormous number of these ancient trigger points in other mammals. Round faces, big eyes relative to head size, soft, high-pitched vocalizations, clumsy, uncoordinated movement. These are not human inventions. They are the universal signature of vulnerable young thing. Across almost the entire mammalian order, and many animals, when they encounter a human, especially a human in apparent need, are responding to the same ancient checklist they would use on their own kind. This is why a dolphin will nudge a drowning swimmer toward shore. This is why elephants have been documented standing guard over injured humans, forming a protective circle the same way they do around their own calves. In 2007, a woman named Ashley Malika Fikadu Bethesda Todd Kirsty Pierce, actually let's set that aside. In 2007, off the coast of New Zealand, marine biologist Rob Howes and a group of swimmers were surrounded, encircled by a pod of dolphins, acting with unusual urgency, herding them tightly together. It was only afterward that Howes noticed a great white shark cruising, just beyond the group. The dolphins were not fetching a stick. They were doing what dolphins do for injured or vulnerable pod members. They extended it to a species that was not their own. You are not special because you are being protected. You are convenient. You look to an animal's ancient brain, remarkably like something worth protecting. This is not a comfortable idea for most people, because humans like to believe connection is chosen, deliberate, meaningful in a personal sense. But some of the deepest bonds between species are not personal at all. They are accidental. They are the byproduct of a nervous system doing exactly what it was built to do, reacting to a shape, a sound, a posture, without knowing or caring what species is standing in front of it. And yet something more does seem to happen over time. Instinct might open the door, but repetition and recognition are what keep it open. Consider dogs, and consider the fact that of all animal behaviors involving bringing things to humans, none is more studied, more common, or more emotionally loaded than a dog delivering an object to its owner. Researchers at EOTVUS Lor-En University in Budapest, led by cane cognition specialist Undum Mikkelsi, have spent decades studying what dogs are actually doing when they bring you a toy. Mikkelsi's work found that dogs engage in something called referential communication, using an object and a gaze back and forth between the object and your face to direct your attention. This is not something wolves do with each other in the wild. It appears to be something dogs developed specifically in response to living alongside humans for roughly 15,000 years. Put plainly, your dog is not simply obeying instinct. Your dog has learned, across generations of domestication, that you respond to shared objects, that a stick placed at your feet and a look aimed at your eyes is a kind of sentence. Play with me. Look at this. I want your attention, and I know this gets it. Dogs did not inherit this behavior passively. They built it slowly as a bridge across the species gap, because the dogs that could communicate this way with humans were fed, sheltered, and kept close, while the dogs that could not were left behind, evolutionarily speaking. Consider what this actually requires cognitively. Referential gesturing, the act of using an object plus a gaze to direct someone else's attention toward a shared goal, was once considered a hallmark of advanced human cognition, something closely tied to language development in human infants. Developmental researchers studying infant pointing behavior found that a baby who points at something and checks whether a caregiver is looking is demonstrating an early, crucial form of shared attention, the foundation on which language itself is eventually built. For a dog to display a structurally similar behavior toward a human, using an object instead of a finger, is a striking claim, and it did not happen by accident. Miklas's research suggests it happened because domestication rewarded exactly this skill, generation after generation, until dogs became, in a very real sense, cognitively shaped by human companionship in ways wolves never were, even genetically identical wolves raised from puppyhood in human homes. This means something important. Not every instance of an animal bringing you something is ancient instinct misfiring on the wrong target. Some of it is a genuinely learned behavior, refined over thousands of years, aimed specifically at you, because you are exactly the audience it evolved to reach. So which is it? Instinct or intention? Accident or relationship? The honest answer, the one that actual researchers give when pressed, is that it depends on the species, and often it is both at once. A cat teaching you to hunt is running an ancient maternal script that happens to have you as its accidental student. A dolphin herding you away from a shark is likely running the same protective instinct it would run for any vulnerable creature nearby. But a dog bringing you a ball, gazing at your face, waiting for your reaction, that is not accidental anymore. That is a behavior shaped specifically around the fact that you exist, that you respond, and that responding back matters. There is a term for this in psychology, borrowed originally from human parent-infant research. It is called attunement, the process by which two beings, through repeated interaction, become responsive to each other's signals in increasingly precise ways. Developmental psychologist Ed Tronick, known for his research on infant emotional responsiveness, showed that even very young human infants form expectations about how a caregiver will respond to their signals, and that this expectation shapes the entire relationship. Some researchers now believe something structurally similar happens between certain animals and the humans they live closely with. Not identical to a parent-infant bond, not sentimental in the way people like to imagine it, but real in the sense that the animal has built an internal model of you specifically and adjusts its behavior based on that model. This is why your dog brings the ball to you, and not to a stranger on the street. This is why an elephant that was raised around a particular caretaker will respond differently to that person than to any other human it encounters. The relationship is not generic, it is specific. It has a history. Elephant researchers have documented this specificity in striking detail. Cynthia Moss, who has studied African elephants for decades, found that elephants maintain detailed social memory, not just of other elephants, but of specific humans who have interacted with their family groups, distinguishing consistently between individuals who pose a threat and individuals who do not, even years after a single encounter. An elephant that has been cared for by a particular veterinarian after an injury will often seek out that same person on future visits, ignoring other humans present, walking directly toward the one it remembers. That is not a generic reflex firing at the sight of a vulnerable shape. That is memory. That is preference. That is, whatever word you want to use for it, something close to relationship. Now here is the twist that reframes the entire question, the one that should sit with you the longest. You have spent your whole life assuming that humans are the ones who decide which animals to bond with. You choose the dog. You choose the cat. You are the one extending the invitation. But the evolutionary and behavioral evidence tells a different story. In almost every documented case of interspecies caregiving, protection, or communication aimed at humans, the animal made the first move. The wolf that got closer to ancient campfires, the dolphin that circled the swimmers, the cat that decided your home was worth staying in and your species was worth teaching. You did not select these relationships so much as you were selected for them, again and again, by creatures whose brains recognize something in you worth responding to. This is the modern mirror, the place where all of this folds back onto your own life. Because you do the exact same thing constantly, without noticing. You respond more warmly to a stranger's baby than to a stranger's adult face. You feel a surge of protective urgency when you hear a child cry, even a child that is not yours, even a child you will never see again. You have felt your chest tighten at the sight of an animal in distress on the side of a road, an animal you have never met and will never meet again. That is the same ancient trigger running in you, the same one running in the humpback whale, the same one running in the cat with the mouse. You are not immune to it. You are made of it. The question you opened with was why animals bring their vulnerable things to humans. But the better question, the one hiding underneath it, is why any creature reaches toward another creature at all, across species, across silence, without guarantee of understanding or reward. The answer researchers keep circling back to, from Tinbergen's trigger stimuli to Miklos' referential dogs to Pittman's protective whales, is that connection was never designed to be exclusive to your own kind. It was built broad, built clumsy, built to fire whenever something small, soft, and vulnerable crosses your path, whatever shape that vulnerability happens to take. There is one more layer worth sitting with before you close this out, and it has to do with why this particular topic tends to move people so deeply when they encounter it. It is not simply that animals are being kind. Kindness, as a word, is too small and too human for what is actually being described. What draws people in is the quiet implication that connection itself might be less rare, less exclusive, and less earned than they assumed. Most people walk through life believing that love, or something like it, has to be built carefully, slowly, through shared language and shared history. And a lot of it is. But some of it, it turns out, is available immediately, offered freely, the moment the right ancient trigger gets pulled in the right ancient brain. You did not have to earn the whale's decision to push a stranger toward the surface. You did not have to earn the dolphins forming a circle around swimmers they had never met. Some connection is simply given, unconditionally, by systems built long before either species had a name for what it was doing. This does not make the connection less real. If anything, it makes it more remarkable, because it means the capacity for this kind of reaching across was not invented by humans and generously extended downward to animals. It was already there, underneath everything, waiting in the oldest parts of the mammalian brain, long before humans existed to receive it. Humans did not teach the world to care about vulnerable things. Humans are simply one more species that happens to trigger the response. Consider, too, how often the direction of this story gets flipped by human vanity. People love to tell stories about the dog who saved its owner, the dolphin who saved the swimmer, the elephant who protected the injured tourist, because these stories flatter something in the listener. They suggest a kind of specialness, a sense that humans occupy a favored position in the natural order, worthy of rescue. But look again at the mechanism underneath each of these stories, and the specialness dissolves into something more universal and, in its own way, more moving. The dog would likely do the same for another dog. The dolphin circles injured pod members with or without a human nearby. The elephant guards its own calves with the same posture it used to guard the tourist. You were not chosen because you are human. You were responded to because you matched a pattern, the same pattern every vulnerable creature matches, in every species capable of noticing it. Maybe that is a smaller kind of specialness than the one you imagined. Or maybe it is a larger one, because it means you are not isolated from the rest of the animal kingdom by some invisible wall of human exceptionalism. You are inside the same system as the whale and the crow and the cat, reachable by the same signals, moved by the same triggers, capable of extending the same reflex outward to creatures that share none of your language and almost none of your biology. So the next time your cat drops something dead at your feet, or your dog nudges a ball into your palm, or you read about a whale that carried a stranger to the surface, remember what is actually happening underneath it. It is not a mystery. It is not magic. It is one of the oldest systems in the animal kingdom, quietly doing exactly what it was built to do. Reaching across a boundary that, to the ancient parts of the brain, was never really there at all. And somewhere in your own chest, the same old system is still running too, waiting for the next small, soft, vulnerable thing to cross your path so it can do, without asking permission, exactly what it has always done.